Daf Yomi, tractate Bava Batra, page 3b, top of the page, the words Bishanim, V'isa, Liha, etc. There, that it will be greater than in years. So his argument about what it would mean that second temple is greater than the first. So one opinion said it was greater in the size of the structure. One said it was greater in years, meaning the second temple stand for a longer period of time than the first temple. And the Gemara comments that this is true, and that is true, meaning the second temple was taller than the first temple, and it also stood for a longer period of time. The Gemara asks, if so, if the second temple building was taller, then to separate between the Holy of Holies and the sanctuary in the second temple, they should have made a wall 30 cubits high, and then made a curtain for the rest of the height. The 70 cubit difference in height between the first and second temples. The Gemara answers, this would have been impossible, as even when a 30 cubit wall that is 6 handbreadths thick stands, it is due to the ceiling and plaster which attaches it to the ceiling that it stands. But without a ceiling and plaster holding it in place, it does not stand. The Gemara continues, but they should have made a wall as high as can possibly stand by itself, and then should have made a curtain for the rest of the height. The Bava said, the sages learned as a tradition that the partition separating the Holy of Holies from the sanctuary should be built either entirely as a wall or entirely as a curtain. It should be built either entirely as a wall as learned from the first temple, or it should be entirely as a curtain as learned from the tabernacle. At no time, however, was there a partition that combined a wall and a curtain. A dilemma was raised before the sages. Do the measurements given in the Mishnah apply to them? The thickness of the materials themselves and the plaster with which the materials were coated, or perhaps just to them without their plaster? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, it is reasonable to say that the measurements refer to them and their plaster, as if it should enter your mind to say that they refer to them without their plaster, then the Tana should have taught the measurements of the plaster as well. Rather, isn't it correct to conclude from here that the measurements refer to them and their plaster? The Gemara rejects this conclusion. No. Actually, I could say to you that they apply to them without their plaster. And since the plaster does not have the thickness of 1 handbreadth, the Tana did not teach such a small measurement. The Gemara asks, but doesn't the Tana teach with regard to bricks that this one provides 1.5 handbreadths and that one provides 1.5 handbreadths? Evidently, the Tana lists even amount less than 1 handbreadth. The Gemara answers, their mention is made of half handbreadths because they are fit to be combined into a full handbreadth. Okay. The Gemara suggests, come and hear a solution to the question from a Mishnah, Eruvin 13b, in which it is taught the crossbeam, which the sages stated may be used to render an alleyway fit for one to carry within it on Shabbat, must be wide enough to receive and hold a small brick, and this small brick is half a large brick, the width of which is 3 handbreadths. That Mishnah is referring to a brick without the plaster. A brick without the plaster. Right. Nice. Okay, the Gemara answers, there the Mishnah Eruvin is referring to large bricks. That measure is three full handbreadths, whereas here the Mishnah is referring to bricks that measure slightly less than 3 handbreadths. And the measurement of 3 handbreadths includes the plaster with which they are coated. The Gemara comments the language of the Mishnah there is also precise as it teaches about a brick of 3 handbreadths, from which one can conclude by inference that there exists also a smaller sized brick. The Gemara affirms, learn from here, that the Mishnah there is referring to large bricks. Rav Chisda says a person may not demolish a synagogue until he first builds another synagogue in its place. There are those who say that the reason for this halacha is due to potential negligence, lest he failed to build a new structure after the old one has been raised. And there are those who say that the reason for this halacha is due to the disruption of prayer, for in the meantime there will be nowhere to pray. Okay? The Gemara asks, what is the practical difference between these two explanations? The Gemara answers that there is a difference between them in a situation where there is another synagogue. Even though the community has an alternative place to pray, there is still a concern that the new synagogue will never get built. It is related that Mar and Mar Zutra demolished and built a summer synagogue in the winter, and in like manner they built a winter synagogue in the summer, so that the community would never be left without a synagogue. Never be left without a synagogue. Okay, I think we're going to stop here, and we're going to do part 2.